Hi everybody, welcome to the start of, well, the very first Feline Google Hangout. I should probably start off by saying that we may well be discussing the book. If you haven't finished the book, there may well be some spoilers within this, so do be aware of that, I should say. Right, so on to the book. We've all been reading After I Left You by Alison Mercer. I really enjoyed this book. I was very, very delighted that we chose this as our first book. The reason that we picked this one, Alison Mercer is, she's a local author, she's based in Abingdon, and we've been chatting to her a lot on Twitter while we were kind of sorting out the book group, and her book After I Left You is set in Oxford, and it just seemed like a fantastic one to start off with. So that's why we chose it. I'll just tell you, do feel free to comment if you have any questions, by the way, otherwise I'll just keep chatting. We did have a meeting last weekend at the Frog Swap, which was really good, and we had a few people turned up to that. We kind of talked about the book as a whole and how that was, and how we really enjoyed reading it, and how it was. We all felt that it was a really easy book to read. It wasn't something that you kind of thought, "Oh, I'm supposed to be reading this book." It was something that you just picked it up, you opened it, you dived straight in. It didn't take a long time to get going. You hit the ground running, and the pace was really good. We felt that Alison didn't get bogged down in description, and she didn't get bogged down in, you can have pages and pages of, this is what this place looks like. We didn't have any of that. We just had enough so that you could picture it in your head, and then she moved on with the action, which we thought was great. Obviously, it's set in Oxford, as I just mentioned, and we had a mixture of people on Saturday, some of whom were in knew Oxford quite well, and some of whom didn't know it so well, which was quite interesting because obviously, as somebody, I know Oxford very well, so I was able to just kind of look at it really and say, okay, so while I was reading, okay, this cafe they're in, I know which cafe that is, I've been to that cafe, and I know various Oxford colleges, so although St Bart's is fictional, I was able to say, okay, so I know these colleges, I know where this goes, I know exactly where that's happening. And it was interesting to hear from some people who didn't know Oxford so well, because they were able to say, I was wondering whether maybe it might have been detrimental to them not knowing Oxford. However, it wasn't at all. They said that the Oxford setting was, everybody has like a picture of Oxford in their mind. So, you've seen it on the telly, you've seen it, pictures of it. So everyone knows roughly what it looks like. So it wasn't at all a problem to kind of visualise the places that they were in. But not knowing the specifics of the location wasn't a problem at all, which is really good. Yeah, we felt that it was quite a nostalgic kind of a book. We had the common, I suppose, that kind of coming of age experience that you have at uni when you leave home for the first time, and you kind of thrown into this whole area with lots of different people, and I think it was kind of quite, she captured that very well, and we were discussing that, and it was interesting that all the characters, when you were in the flashback 90s period, seemed to be very, they seemed so young, and we've got to meet them as adults, and meeting them as kids was interesting. We talked a little bit about the breakup between Victor and Anna, and the kind of the repercussions of that, and there was a definite feeling of anger towards Anna, who definite feeling of anger towards Anna, just because she didn't get angry with Victor, and you wanted her to really kind of like lose it and just go totally nuts. And we also felt quite upset, especially the character of Meg was particularly upset with Meg, because she was the one who you expected to kind of, you know, stand up for Anna, because Anna was clearly the person who should have been protected in that situation. And, you know, she'd been hurt, and this close group of friends, you wanted them to rally around her, and the fact that they didn't was just, well, it was kind of heartbreaking, really, wasn't it? We were also really lucky on Saturday to have Alison Mercer herself come and talk to us, she's so lovely, and it was a real pleasure to have her along. We talked quite a lot about the book, the cover of the book, the book cover, I should say. It was. She was quite involved in the input of the cover, and there is, and she wanted it to be really quite warm, and she wanted it to be really, she wanted it to be she didn't want it to appear dark, but she didn't want it to be kind of pink and fluffy, because it is obviously women's literature, and there is always the danger. Oh, I think we've just been joined by somebody. Is that Rosie? Hello, Rosie.
Hello.
Excellent. Hiya.
Made it work.
Excellent. Oh, good.
Oh, hang on.
Fantastic. Hey.
I don't know how you get her question for still
Really?
It should be just up on the left of the screen. Got it?
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, good. Good. Keep feline. Way. New tech is nothing without teething trouble.
I know, it's great, isn't it?
Cool. So, what did you think of it? Just because everyone must be really bored of hearing my voice now.
Not at all, Deb. It's been really interesting. I thought it was a really well-written book. I really enjoyed it. And I thought the kind of how it starts kind of really grips you, and it just takes you all the way through, because you kind of have this thread of this thing, this kind of portentous thing that happens at the end. You just don't know until you get right to the end of the book. I think that's a clever technique by Alison to use that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like that little kind of breadcrumb trail that she kind of dropped. That each tidbit was enough to keep you interested, but also the it's the kind of the action in between each clue was engaging enough that you weren't just going, oh, come on, where's the next clue? I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting how she managed to kind of flesh out each character. I thought it was quite skilled that you could kind of build so many characters with so much kind of colour in both, across both sexes. I thought it was quite interesting that she managed to do that so effectively.
Absolutely, yeah, I'd agree with that. I thought there were quite a lot of. There wasn't a single character that I could say that I liked, like properly loved, like right the way through the book.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting what Anais was saying the other day about how they're all kind of like in that university bubble, and how it's such a kind of bizarre world, because you're so removed from your previous world and then the real world that you're launched into after that, and so you become very kind of introspective and selfish, and I thought that was really well portrayed. And as you say, they're all really kind of, you couldn't really empathise with them. Like even at the end, you kind of feel like Anna at uni is to her, later on, and it's quite interesting, like the difference between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite kind of difficult to do that, because they're obviously the same people, but kind of getting that difference between them being like kids and then being grown-ups was quite. I thought she did that really well, and that's quite a difficult thing to do, because they are the same people.
Yeah, and being able to kind of portray the time lapse because obviously, you know, and her kind of like growing as a person, with her wanting to find her father, and that element as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was kind of an interesting storyline as well, with her kind of quest to find her father, and how that kind of got very much kind of thrown by the wayside when she was at uni. But when she was older and kind of wanting to face up to like her past, and you know, kind of really wanting to explore who she was, it was kind of quite interesting. They kind of brought that storyline, kind of came back out of it. We were kind of talking on Saturday, we spoke quite a lot about that, and we asked Alison about it as well, because I think there was kind of quite a lot of feeling in the group that it wasn't quite as gripping as the rest of the story, I guess you'd say. We weren't quite entirely sure why that storyline was there. I mean, I kind of, on a personal level,
behind it, what was her reasoning to include that?
Well, she was speaking about how she felt that Anna was the kind of person that really needed a push to kind of face up to her past, and she felt that she needed to have a character that was close enough to her to give her that push, but not so close to the action that she would resist it. So that kind of father figure obviously was able to do that, but in the fact that he'd been absentee for most of her life meant that he wasn't close to it at all. So that was, which I guess for me kind of, that kind of made it kind of make a bit more sense.
Yeah, and I think it also added some like roundness to the novel, because you know, obviously there was a big amount of time between them being at university and, you know, the latter part of the book, and I think that that having that kind of thread throughout kind of gave it a more depth. And I know it was definitely a very kind of like minor sub story, but I thought it was quite interesting that it was there. And as you say, it's kind of a tool for her to kind of gain some perspective and acceptance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, I quite like that there was kind of something else going on, because I think it would have got quite kind of intensive if it had just been about her uni friends, and like, because it was quite an intense story. It was kind of, you kind of came out at the end of it going, Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. But I liked the fact that it was just kind of highlighting like her growth as a person.
Yeah, definitely. And she is a very different person at the end of the book to who she is at the beginning of the book, and I guess kind of at the earliest point in her life when we meet her, kind of her in the car on the way off to uni. And it's quite, and obviously she's been through quite a lot during that period. Yeah. What did you make of her kind of reconciliation with Victor at the end of it? Because I thought, I mean, it was the kind of the inevitable conclusion to the book, but I kind of,
you were willing it to happen, but at the same time, felt like he's just a bit of a bastard. Like, why are you going back to him? You know?
Yeah, exactly. It was like, how could you ever forgive him for what he did to you with your best friend?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my god. But it's kind of an interesting question on that point of view, because you know they were very young when they were together to begin with. So I guess that kind of sheds some kind of, throws a bit of perspective on it, in that, you know, can you, somebody who's at that kind of transitional stage of their life, can you really judge them 20 years later by that? I don't know. I mean, I guess it's kind of an interesting point. But,
I thought it was a very kind of like romantic idealistic ending,
Mm,
just because
yeah.
like it was like, oh, they're meant to be together and it's true love, and it's like, well,
Mm,
actually, but then there was lots of strands of the story that were like, you know, this is the real world, and that added some grit to the book. But I just feel a bit like, is this actually, would this actually happen?
mm, yeah, yeah. No, definitely it was. I mean, I guess it does happen. People are
Yeah,
together when they're younger, and but yeah,
absolutely.
no, I don't know. I don't know how I'd kind of. I don't. Yeah, thinking about some of the guys I dated at uni, I don't think I'd want to kind of revisit. But yeah, it does.
And sometimes it takes 40 years or something, and you meet up with somebody again, and there's something there. So it's not it's not an unrealistic storyline. And it's always nice to read a book with a happy ending.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of the happy ending. I guess that's kind of why it's kind of escapism, isn't it, really? You kind of want to feel uplifted at the end of it. If it's
Yeah.
something that you're kind of reading to take you out of your kind of everyday, bedtime reading, you don't want to be kind of reading it, finishing it, going, oh, I'm so depressed now.
Well, exactly. Like, you want to read because you do want the escapism, and you don't want to be kind of left with oh well, he's got a kid, and it's it seems like I'm not sure whether I trust him anymore. It's like, well, where's the kind of appeal in that,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's kind of, yeah. I think it's it really needed to have that happy ending just because of the kind of the proper, as you say, the gritty aspects and kind of what happened to Anna, kind of in terms of the rape scene and the betrayal of all of her friends who she thought were like the best people in the world and who just completely hurt her and left her, and it was, I think, to kind of counteract that.
At Meg's wedding, you get the perspective when they all turn around and they actually say, say to Barnaby, basically, fuck off, and I suppose then it's kind of, that's the moment that she realises that they are different people and they've grown and they're not as self-obsessed as they were.
Mm.
So the overall happy ending is, it kind of makes more sense within that context.
Absolutely. I think Alison was saying that she very definitely didn't want it to have like a kind of fluffy, kind of chick lit pink fluffy cover, because she felt that would have been completely going against all of the themes in the book, because it is quite a dark book, but on the other hand it does have this kind of happy, idealistic, happy ending to it, so she didn't want it to go kind of too far the other way. She's saying there was a cover that it nearly ended up with, and apparently there are some photos online which I was going to Google and forgot to, but I will do that at some point. But it's kind of the dark green of the dress that she was wearing. It's that kind of dark green with some kind of darker kind of colours on the front of it, and then kind of, I can't remember, there was some other kind of imagery on there, and she was quite pleased that didn't end up with that cover, just because it would have been too dark for the book.
No, I think I like the cover, and it makes you want to pick it up. You're not kind of thinking, oh, this is just going to be really light and fluffy. And I think that she kind of walks the line between something easy to read, kind of lit, and something that's has a bit more depth to it. So I think it's a really good book to choose, Deb, for a first feline book.
I'm pretty pleased with this book choice actually, and the fact that Alison was like happy to come and chat to us. I mean, she was so lovely,
Yeah.
really lovely lady. Yeah, I thought I was very pleased with that as the first choice.
So what other themes did you discuss on Saturday?
We talked a bit about her relationship with Keith, and kind of Keith as an interesting character. And I know that we obviously touched on that later in the pub, but we talked about. Alison asked us kind of which of the characters we would most like to have as friends, and Keith's name came up. I think it was Anais who said that, you know, out of all of them, probably Keith. And we kind of went on to chat about how it was a really kind of one-sided friendship that they had, just because she knew so much about her and she didn't know anywhere near as much about him. It turned out that, you know, the basis of their friendship, as in, you know, that first night they talked about how she was, you know, lusting after Victor and he was lusting after this girl, and that just at the end of the book, that was just like, oh well, that was all a big lie because actually he's gay, and you know, that's
and the fact that it was 3 years later and she still hadn't realised.
Oh no, you'd have thought if you were that close with somebody, you'd notice. Just something, little bits about it, you just kind of pick up on the clues. But and also, there's a point in the book where somebody says to her, "Oh, Keith's not looking so good at the moment." She's like, "Oh, I haven't seen him for a while," and she kind of goes to find him, and you just think, if you were kind of that close to somebody and you hadn't seen them for a while, and they were
that down.
Yeah, you'd kind of make more of an effort. But I guess again, it's a game of being young and, you know, doing your own thing, and you don't always, I guess, think about that.
Yeah, and I think also sometimes with kind of university friendships, you know, you might have quite a close knit group, but there's always this kind of feeling of superficiality that is not quite real, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something. I feel like a lot of my uni friends I became a lot closer to after uni than at uni, and I think that maybe that's portrayed through the book as well. But they're the kind of people that you're kind of all thrown in together, and you're in this kind of really alien environment, and you have this kind of slightly sort of held back persona. And maybe that's that kind of selfish air that Alison portrays most of the characters in the book. And then, yeah, not so much Keith, which I suppose makes you kind of warm to him. But I think it's interesting that, you know, there's quite a few times where in the book, you know, it's either, you know, Keith is described, and he's described as, you know, dark holes and, you know, forlorn or whatever, and yet none of them seem to kind of pick up on the fact that you might need a bit more support than any of the others. And I feel like you know, you wouldn't be that removed as you know, even in that kind of like, you know, alien world of university. I think that you would still pick up on that, which is why I kind of feel like it's a little bit clumsy, that element of the story.
And they all, I think one of the things about the group is that they all had their own stuff going on. They'd all got, like, you know, slight issues with their parents, you know, Anna not knowing who her dad is, and Keith being adopted, and Clarissa having a dad over in the States and a pushy mother, and Victor with his father with the dementia, and, you know, etc. And I think they were all kind of so wrapped up in what they were all doing and their own dysfunctions that they didn't necessarily
pick up on him.
No, exactly.
He's still part of the group, and he's actually, in a way, you know, he's quite a kind of fun central character in the fact that he's always quite witty and, you know, coming up with, you know, things to say or whatever.
I love. He's like a proper old Oxford eccentric. I love that he wears a cape.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. It's like, you know, you kind of always want to have like an Oxford student,
Yeah.
just like wearing some kind of crazy outfit and going, yes, of course, darling, I'm wearing a cape and I'm going to find you some random book in the junk shop and give it to you for your birthday and blah.
Yeah. You can
It's like,
absolutely imagine, can't you?
I'm fairly certain I've bumped into quite a few of them on Cornmarket Street.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I guess he was kind of in a way kind of quite a kind of stereotypical character in a way, just because, you know, the black and the cape and, you know, smoking pot and
Yeah.
drinking too much and being a bit down and
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of all the characters he was, although obviously we find out very early on that he's the one that died.
Yeah.
Of all the characters, he's the, if you didn't know that right from the start and you had to say, okay, which one of these characters is not going to make it, you go, that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt a bit like Alison didn't know him as well as the others.
Okay.
But I think, you know, that's just part of the, you know, how they're all portrayed, and obviously their kind of selfishness comes out more, therefore we learn more about all the other characters. And there is, you know, and part of the kind of quality of the book is that Keith has this kind of mysterious quality to him, and we don't know a lot about him, and that adds to the kind of the jeopardy of the novel, because you're constantly thinking of what's going to happen, and actually holding him back as a character. And kind of you're not quite sure whether he's somebody that would commit suicide, or, you know, you don't know him well enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's kind of, I guess that's kind of partly because none of them really know him that well. So I guess the fact that we as the reader don't know him that well kind of brings us into that. And we were talking a bit as well about kind of Anna as the narrator and how it changes things, seeing things through her eyes, instead of her just being, you know, the person who's spoken about. And we were talking about how she's the one who you could describe the least. You know, you could most of the characters you say, okay, so Clarissa, she's the loud one, with the, you know, the bright red hair and the, you know, kind of celebrity mother, and Victor, he's the one who likes directing plays, and then you've got, you know, you could kind of, all of them you could kind of describe, apart from if you were to describe Anna, other than saying she's the narrator, what would you say about her? Which I guess is kind of partly because, you know, I as a person, you go through life not really commenting on, oh, I'm like this and I do that and I do the other. You kind of just observe other people. So I guess it's kind of partly to do with that. But it was interesting that Keith was the other character, although he was obviously very eccentric. You know, you wouldn't necessarily be able to
Say that you know him.
Yeah, exactly. I think I've just had a comment emailed in.
Okay.
So I'm just going to see if that is the case. Possibly. Let's have a look. Okay, right, it's from my mum. She can't get the comments column up, but she would like to comment on the character of Clarissa. I've read the book twice and I still don't know what I think of her. She could be so generous, and then the next time I wanted to slap her. I think that's a fair comment. And also, hello, Mum. Yeah, what did you think about Clarissa?
Yeah, I felt exactly the same, and I felt like how can you be that removed from somebody? You know, even if you were like infatuated with Victor, you know, how can you do that to one of your best friends? And even though she doesn't think of Anna as one of her best friends in her head, she spent 3 years with her. You know, there's going to be some bond there, even if it's, you know, I don't feel like, you know, that she's kind of best friend status. But I feel like, how can I feel like it's so removed from any sort of human characteristics that I would empathise with, and maybe that, you know, maybe that's the just how she's been written in that way.
Yeah, I think I can't think of anybody who would have the phone conversation that Clarissa had with Anna, kind of following her sleeping with Victor, and for her to just be like, oh well, it's going on for a while, you know, it's always been me rather than you, and blah 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 blah, and blah blah blah, and it's like just to have that, and they've been so close for the last 3 years, and to have to kind of turn around and have that conversation with her instead of going, oh oops, so I kind of slept with your boyfriend, but yeah. You know,
I can't imagine anybody that I know or have known doing that ever.
No, it's just such a kind of callous thing to just turn around and do, just off the blue. But again, at the time, she could be, as Mum says, she could be so generous. You know, she's a really kind of interesting character from that point of view, just because she's quite dangerous. You don't know when she's going to just flip. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting that, that she's everything she does is so calculated.
Absolutely, it is quite kind of like, okay, so I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then this is going to work for me, and that's going to work for me, and these people are going to do this for me, and that person's going to do that for me, and this person is of use now, and it's interesting how kind of the present day characters just kind of say that, you know, she dropped Victor pretty quickly. It was a very kind of short-lived kind of relationship that they had, if you could even really call it a relationship, and it was. And it just kind of ripped the fabric of this group to pieces, and then was just over, because it just kind of served a purpose for her, whatever purpose that might be.
So at the top of the hour, you were talking about Meg. What were your feelings about Meg?
I was quite surprised, actually, quite disappointed in her, actually, just because she was the one who, you know, she's the vicar's daughter who's described as the moral compass of the group, and she's kind of the most kind of motherly friend, I suppose. She's kind of the most kind of just the most caring and the most moral, and then when she finds out that one of her friends has cheated with her other friend's boyfriend, you wanted her to take Anna's side, you know. You would, wouldn't you, if your mate was like, oh my god, this other friend of ours has, you know, slept with my boyfriend and we've broken up and it's awful. You wouldn't just try and go, oh well, you know, that's kind of the way it goes. We're at uni, people kind of break up and stuff, and that's that, and that's the way it is, and what you're getting so upset about. You kind of wanted her to be a bit more caring, a bit more focused on looking after Anna, and instead she just kind of drops her into the, I don't know what you're making all the fuss about. But yeah,
I know. I don't. Yeah, I find that quite challenging. Then, you know, again, they're all being portrayed as, you know, selfish, and that you don't want to empathise with them, and it's like, well, that just, you know, and up to that point, you do want to empathise with Meg and feel for her as a character, and actually, maybe that Alison doesn't want us to kind of feel that way about them at that stage in their lives.
Absolutely. I think, I don't know, it got me thinking quite a lot about, you know, my own time at uni and what I was like then, and what, you know, And I think it's interesting to kind of use it to kind of draw that comparison. Obviously, you know,
Yeah.
I didn't have that kind of close-knit group friendship with that kind of horrendous incident occurring, obviously, thankfully. But it is kind of interesting, because I think when you are that age and you feel like you're kind of so grown up and like you have so much responsibility, but you don't really understand how to use that at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, a bit like, I've had another comment through from Mum. Oh yeah, about Clarissa and the dress. When she ripped the label off the dress for the ball, Mum says, "I'm still feeling quite upset for the girl who thought she had hired the dress for the ball." Yeah, it's just that kind of, you kind of just be like, well, yeah, where's this amazing dress that I've got? What's that girl doing wearing it? What's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that kind of, nobody was that fussed about it, I guess, because you don't really.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe.
Like Anna didn't even think about, I should take it back to the shop.
No, she was just like, it's supposed to be some other girls. Oh dear. Oh well.
But I love it, so it's mine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's that's just something that I would never do that now, but I could kind of comprehend that happening at that kind of age.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And even maybe, yeah. Yeah, no, I think so. That you just kind of, and especially with, you know, if you were friends with somebody like Clarissa, you just wouldn't, you know, you wouldn't stand up to her, would you? You wouldn't say anything.
No, she's one of those kind of force of nature people who just kind of drag you into their kind of whirlwind, and while you're in there, everything's amazing and wonderful and perfect and brilliant and great, and then as soon as you're out of favour, you get kicked out, and suddenly it's just like, this is the most awful thing in the world. You know, you're kind of in this. She's kind of one of those people who you kind of, I guess, you learn as you get older that people like that.
Yeah,
they're great fun to be around, but you can't get too close. Yeah.
I think it was interesting how Anna's family are portrayed, and that this kind of emphasises her status in the world, and that, you know, although they, you know, love her and spend time with her and help her out in many situations, as you know, and they're kind of like a little unit in their own way, because she always seems kind of like little entity that's kind of being like a kind of satellite around the family, really. And so I thought that was interesting, that kind of emphasised that side of her personality. And I think that obviously that and then, you know, the baby thing as well. I think that really drives home to what she wants to with her dad and have some more kind of connection with herself and her history and her kind of background. And I think that's quite an interesting kind of thread that goes through the novel, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're very separate, and I think Anna does that very particularly, kind of keeping her family very separate from her kind of uni life. So it's kind of almost when she's doing something with her family, she's almost in this little box, isn't she? And she's kind of doing stuff with them, and then she's doing stuff with her uni self. And it's even when she's kind of beginning the reconciliation with Victor, she can't bring herself to be around him while she's trying to sort out the stuff with her dad. She has to kind of email and say, okay, we need to kind of cool things for a bit. I'm going to go and do this thing, and I'll see you on the inside. Yeah, she's very much kind of everything in a box. Like, you know, this is what I'm doing. This is to do with this. I'm going to do that with it, and I'm not going to see these people while that's happening. And then I'm going to go and do this with these people, and I'm not going to think about that. And And it's odd that even though she does that, everything still kind of triggers the rest of it, because if she hadn't found her father and she hadn't found the courage to find out about him and what he's like, and then she wouldn't have. Then she wouldn't have
I don't think
kind of gone on to confront everything else about what happened at uni.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting actually what you were saying earlier about how Anna is the narrator, and so actually by the end of the book you don't feel like you know her as well as the other characters, although you know her family, you know the facts, but you don't feel like you know her kind of emotionally. And I find it interesting how throughout the book people kind of comment on her behaviour, and sometimes these little threads that run throughout about her being aloof and not opening up, and I think that her family and then the kind of subplot with her dad as well kind of all add to that, and it's like, you know, just kind of emphasising how scarred she is from her experiences at university, and how closed she's become. So you know that the relationships that she had, obviously all the relationships that we knew, have all broken down. Not alienated, but kind of an outsider in her family. And it's only kind of through these kind of turn of events, kind of slowly opening herself again. And I think that the plot with her father is just kind of emphasising that she's coming to some sort of acceptance.
Yeah.
A nice kind of, you know, nicely ties up the novel, I think.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, I agree very much with that. It does all kind of come together very nicely for her at the end. Yeah. Before, I think we should probably, because we've been, oh, right. Oh, it's 8:52 p.m. We had another comment from Mum. She says, "Love the opening chapter with the awful bridesmaid's dress." Yeah, I thought that was quite good. Yeah, just, you know, the one when you're dripping wet and carrying a god awful bridesmaid's dress. That's not when you want to run into your ex at all. No. The last person you want to meet.
Perfectly set up for the film, I think that.
Absolutely. I think we should set up a feline production company, I think, and we should buy the rights. So after an FG. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, I think we should probably wrap up there. Thank you very much, Rosie. Sorry we couldn't get you on immediately.
I think at the beginning.
No, that's all right. Technical issues. It's fun. So this is kind of an experiment anyway. So, you know, I think this format's quite good though. I quite enjoyed myself. I hope everybody else has. I hope you have, Mum, and anyone else who's watching. So this is
really your kind of comments and questions have been really insightful. So I think it's been a really good hour.
I think it's been a really good hour as well. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for you participating, Rosie, and thank you very much to Mum for participating as well. Oh, okay. Right. Lucy Diamond, One Night in Italy is going to be our next book. It is by Lucy Diamond. Sorry, something went really screwy with the screen there. And it is Lucy Diamond. She used to live in Oxford, I believe. She's now based in Bath, and this was voted for by the Feline Team Feline. This will be our October book. Our November book, we will be voting for. I'll be sending around details in an email, which should hopefully go out next week, with more information on this one and details of how you can vote for our November book. Right, so I think that's about everything. So awesome. Thank you very much for coming, everybody, and have a lovely evening.
Cool.
Bye-bye.
Bye.